Hi all, Rick here. One non-Starfleet ship I have yet to look into is one of the most iconic designs in Star Trek, the fearsome Borg Cube. Gigantic, implacable, imposing, and spreading signs of fear across the Milky Way, the millions of Borg Cubes in existence are there for only one purpose: assimilation. The creation of a Borg Cube is not witnessed in canon, but it's rumoured that they were effectively grown. Nanomachines and drones worked in tandem to facilitate and program the growth of metals into expanding cubes that were constructed from the core outwards until they reached their maximum size. The Borg Cube is almost exactly 3 kilometres cubed, with exact readings estimating 3,037 metres of tritanium plating. This makes it almost 3 times as long as the largest Starfleet vessels, and that sheer scale grants it a lot of redundancies, power and durability. Much of their internal volume, however, is filled with chasmous spans, connected by walkways. Part of this cavernous interior's function was so that the ship could literally consume and house other vessels to be dissected, studied and assimilated over time. There was no bridge, no engineering, no sickbay and so on, with every cube having all its systems dispersed throughout the entire ship. With the networked nature of the Borg and their sleeping minds running the computations of the vessel itself, there was no need for such central locations, which could serve as vulnerabilities. Because of this, the ship could theoretically remain operational even if 78% of it was inoperable. No command centre. The whole thing was a brain. No main power core. Numerous generators everywhere worked flawlessly in tandem. They did have weak points, however, but these were more connective areas where processing systems or power conduits converged, such as vinculums for hive mind processing or central power matrices for regulating power flow. The internal layout of a cube was mostly the same, however, variations were common as they were highly adaptable and could rearrange their superstructure to accommodate other roles. The crew level is hard to determine. In fact, initially, scans of Borg vessels were unable to detect or separate life signs from the technology. Although, from further evaluations, crew estimates are anywhere between 5,000 to 129,000 drones. Most of these were inactive, acting as the operating system for the ship. However, a good portion would be on maintenance or control duties, operating the vessel. Internally, scattering and dispersal fields limited transport and sensor readings from enemy ships. Borg sensors, however, were incredibly accurate, surpassing Starfleet's own systems both in hardware and software. So much so that sensor technology was one of the most prized reverse-engineered developments Voyager brought back to Starfleet, and implemented across numerous science vessels throughout the Federation, being around 10 times more accurate than Starfleet's best sensors at the time. The cubes also did not communicate among themselves in the standard fashion of subspace communications. Instead, they operated through a central plexus which connected them to the other cubes through the Queen's mind, giving her insight and presence across every drone, limited only by her processing speeds. Each vessel housed a Queen cell, a chamber where a Borg Queen could sit and connect to the entire vessel while retaining her connection to the rest of the collective. As of 2380, most of these cells had a spatial trajector installed to facilitate her arrival or escape onto any Borg ship. In terms of armaments, the fearsome cube is host to numerous weapons and many different energy forms. The Borg tend not to use phasers, as the primary benefit of our phaser system is the variety it brings, and with the Borg's arsenal, they already have that covered. Additionally, the exact number of weapons' hardpoints varies, as most Borg ships are capable of reconfiguring their hull to create new points. An average seems to be 36, however. Their favoured weapons were actually a tractor beam with energy-draining effects. Not only did the beam hold a target in place, like a glass jar over a captive insect, it interfered with and denied the captive target energy. Remaining in the grip of a cube for too long saw diminishing chances of escape. Additionally, the Borg were always testing and analysing the impacts and results of their attacks, using the feedback data to ascertain the shield frequencies or other vulnerabilities of a system that they're assailing. This was one of the first lessons Starfleet had to learn to overcome. Their answer to this efficient tactic was to continually remodulate and rotate shields and weapons settings. That same versatility in piercing enemy vessels was also applied to the Borg's own defences. The Borg did have force fields and deflector shielding. However, it was a system that seemed to border on what was defined as a shield. There was an electromagnetic subspace field that worked in tandem with the shields, giving them their infamous adaptability when combined with their incredible computing power. Every weapon's impact was studied and catalogued, with their shield systems remodulated to counter it. Eventually, a weapon's system was rendered ineffective against the Borg as they adapted. The number of shots you could get off before this happened, however, was variable. Sometimes it was only one. Sometimes you got lucky and could fire a dozen or so before they found the right shield frequencies and settings to perfectly counter it. Following this, they would employ a narrow cutting beam, which was used to not only dissect a ship, but as a weapon. They could take samples of technology to be analysed, looking for valuable advancements in particular, or simply use it to lacerate a ship into pieces. With its piercing effectiveness, and the highly advanced Borg sensors, cubes could simply target a weak point of a starship and fire straight through it, acting as if the hull plating and uranium was not there. Couple this with their adaptability to rapidly finding weaknesses in shielding and you could frequently see a two-shot kill from a cube. Fire once, analyse. Fire again, destroy. Other armaments included energy-draining torpedoes that weakened shields immensely on impact, high-powered neutron beams, and a myriad of other explosives that varied from photon to unknown torpedoes. Regeneration was another factor in their ships. The vessels could repair themselves at incredible speeds through the application of nanomachines that could manipulate the bulkheads themselves, drone repair teams, both drones and drones. A ship could fully repair itself in around 20 minutes and conduct major repairs while still performing other actions. The extent of their ability to recover has not been tested, but it seems they do need a break from battle to fully recover. So when it comes to warp travel, the Borg cubes have been recorded reaching speeds in excess of 9.9 with no strain on their systems, meaning that unlike most Starfleet ships they could probably cruise at this velocity for as long as they had power. Exactly how and where they generate the warp bubble is also unknown, as no dedicated nacelles have been located. However, that was not the only method of travel that they had, as they were infamous for their extensive transwarp technology, bolstered by a transwarp network. The transwarp network is a series of gates and braces in subspace layers that facilitates faster than warp travel. However, the cubes themselves can also access this network when in proximity to a subspace corridor. Structural integrity projectors create a field ahead of the vessel, then open a transwarp vortex. Numerous transwarp coils are found throughout a cube that act to generate this effect, and funnily enough, these are probably more understood than their plane warp tech. The stress of such an event can tear a ship apart if unprotected, with gravitational and temporal effects. Finally, The Borg Cube was also capable of opening rifts in time to facilitate time travel. However, this was a cheat code the Borg preferred not to use, as assimilating a target back in time negated any technological harvest they could gain. As the Borg cubes could alter their structure, internally and out, many different variations were observed, albeit with minor cosmetic differences. We only really see 3 different versions: the initial cube, the version with an entire sphere docked inside, and the version with external valleys carved into it. The exact reason for these variations is unknown, but they all seem equally capable. There is of course the tactical cube too, but this is different enough for Starfleets to readily classify it as a separate ship. Generally, a single cube was designed to be able to take on an entire planetary system and act as the assimilation hub for a species' homeworld. The Borg generally preferred to assimilate a ship or simply ignore it, and most of their weaponry and defences are geared up for this purpose. Tractor beams and shield draining effects, a toolkit of dissection and analysis devices, and the cubes themselves being large enough to house their specimens, all show the intent of the collective. They present this unassailable monolith before dispassionately holding their target at arm's length while it struggles, and they set to work. It's a methodical and cold presence that invokes fear from such a simple design. Just because a vessel was unassuming and unthreatening to them did not mean it was safe from the Borg. After all, how are the Borg to know if you have any advanced tech to hand unless they take a look? The destruction of a Borg cube can be achieved through one of 2 ways: ceaseless firepower that never lets up, and pure attrition can cause a cube to eventually create weaknesses, as we saw with the Battle of Sector 001. The Federation fleet had been beating the vessel long enough that numerous reallocations and regenerations had created points of stress within their normally dispersed systems. This is the weakness exploited by the fleet when Picard's arrival revealed to him the cube's current status, and focused fire destroyed it. I'm also going to include things like solar flares and species 8472 in the firepower category here, as these are simply exceedingly powerful blasts that the Borg have had no time to adapt to. The second way is of course to disrupt their connection to the hive mind, or exploit it with different commands, as seen after the Battle of Wolf 359, or the numerous derelict cubes that were severed from the collective. Such a severing or malfunction often triggers a self-destruct to prevent their technology from being recovered, but not always. Technically, a third way to destroy a cube might be overwhelming physical impact, but any such act would have to contend with the rest of their defences, and we have also seen one crash onto a planet from orbit and be pretty much unaffected. So, further testing required. Thanks for watching my breakdown on the stats and lore of the Borg Cube. It remains one of the biggest and best antagonists of the Federation, and the sheer unassailability of these ships did so much to make them into the terrors the Borg are. In some ways it's sad to see them overcome over the course of 40 years or so of Starfleet encounters. But of course it was going to have to happen. The Borg literally are too overpowered to allow to propagate, as they have done for millennia. So, until the next one, I've been Recutus, and I'll see you next time for another lore video. Thanks again, and goodbye.